Chapter 7. Opposition begins. For it must needs be that offences come, but woe to that man by whom the offence cometh. Matt. 18:7. From the commencement of the restored gospel, Satan has laid a cunning plan, thinking to destroy the work of God. He stirreth up their hearts to anger against this work. D&C 10:22-24. Thus, whenever God sets about to perform a special work, the devil promptly prepares a means to destroy it. The warning by the two Nephite messengers began to be realized. The powers of darkness were being combined in an effort to destroy or stop the work of that mine. It is reasonable that if the Lord was inspiring that work, and its mission was to help save millions of people from calamities, then surely the Prince of Darkness would oppose it. Opposition often came from many different sources, but always with the same objective: stop Bishop Coyle, and stop the work at the mine. One day when Frank Woodward was in charge of the drilling, he said that a little dark Lamanite appeared to him, and told him that this is the beginning of the TURNDOWN', and Frank was very powerfully convinced that he should make the drilling, according to the Lamanite's instructions, to follow the wall that leaned to the east. The bishop allowed Frank and those who wanted to pursue his lead to make a 42x42 wormhole, while the majority of men followed Coyle's directions. After much digging by both groups, the wormhole intercepted the bishop's diggings further down. The main group had already passed Frank's group. To this day, when difficulty or opposition arises, it is usually attributed to the little dark Lamanite. Bishop Coyle was told that 3 men would lose their lives at the mine. The first was Lee Gardner in 1912, who was killed when he fell in the old workings as he was going on his last shift, just prior to leaving on a mission for the church. The second man killed was Reed Waite. On September 17, 1934, just 40 years to the day and hour from the time they first started to work the mine, September 17, 1894, Reed Waite, young, energetic, intelligent, of the highest moral fiber, and a lifelong supporter of the Dream Mine, met his death from the shedding of his blood, when a misfire water soaker 9 hours old unexpectedly exploded, when he was preparing to remove it. His working companion, Leroy Barney, was with him at the time in that narrow shaft of the winds, which they had deepened to about 250 feet at the time, stood with him side by side, as they watched a bucket of muck go up the hoist. Suddenly, in an instant, there was an explosion of 6 sticks of deadly dynamite from the water-soaked 9-hour-old misfire. Miraculously, Barney was quite uninjured from the blast, but young Reed Waite was severely and mortally wounded, and his life's blood was shed in the mine willingly and without regret, for he did not lose consciousness until the very end, and he was able to express himself. His brother, Lewis Waite, who operated the hoist at the time, still carried on with the other loyal workers at the mine, to help vindicate that death, and confirm that testament of the relief mine. Dream Mine Story, Pierce, page 77. The third man killed was 17-year-old David Kunz, who died on December 27, 1939, while he was shoveling gravel near a 6-foot embankment. A large chunk of frozen dirt and ice toppled on him. The work of God has always encountered opposition. The relief mine would, of course, be a prime object of opposition from the devil. The two heavenly messengers warned Bishop Coyle that it would come, but the manner of opposition by the adversary was most unusual. During the 1880s, the church was unmercifully persecuted by the United States government for living the law of plural marriage. The church took sanctuary outside of the U.S. borders by establishing colonies in Canada and in Old Mexico for the polygamists. If a man chose to take plural wives, it was necessary that he travel to one of these colonies, so he would not be breaking United States law. However, after the smooth hearings by the U.S. Senate from 1904 to 06 and additional pressures from the government after that, the church decided to further relinquish faith in the principle of plural marriage by issuing another manifesto in 1910. This created a reason for President Joseph F. Smith to make a visit to the Mormon colonies, where he attempted to break up the practice of plural marriages. He also wanted to prevent any further contracts in that relationship. He would promote genealogy as a substitute for living plural marriage, just as Wilford Woodruff had done. In his attempt to justify the abandonment of that principle, he declared that the next temple would be built in Mexico. But the saints in Mexico were prospering quite well. They were faithful people, and of course were somewhat taken back by the announcement that the church would now abandon plural marriage in all the world. In 1890, the church conceded to the pressure of the government by abandoning any further solemnizations of plural marriages in their temples and endowment house. Now they were relinquishing that practice everywhere. For these concessions and forfeitures, the saints were promised a temple. This was a poor consolation prize, as they were soon to experience. When Bishop Coyle heard this announcement about the Mexican temple, he was puzzled. Said he, "President Smith wouldn't have made that promise if he had seen what I saw in a dream. I saw Mexican soldiers driving these saints out of Mexico, and they were allowed to take only one piece of baggage each with them. There won't be enough of our people in Mexico to support a temple if this happens." Pierce, page 23. Word soon spread of Bishop Coyle's prophecy about the temple not being built in Mexico at this time. Here were two prophecies being circulated, but they contradicted each other. Both men claimed divine instruction. Both spoke about the Mexican temple. It seemed as though it was some sort of test, a catalyst towards solidifying the issue of who had favor with the Lord. Church members and stockholders were apprehensive as to what would soon transpire. This was becoming a vital issue: who had the gift of prophecy. The president of the church, or a little humble farmer in Leland, Utah. If the temple were built and the saints were not driven out of Mexico, then it was obvious that Bishop Coyle was deceived, and he did not have the spiritual communication with the Lord that he claimed. On the other hand, if the temple were not built and the saints were driven out of Mexico, then the same premise was true of the president of the church. Rumors spread like wildfire, and it was not long before President Joseph F. Smith heard that Coyle claimed the president was a false prophet, which wasn't what he said at all. Only fate and time would settle the issue of who spoke the truth. Then came the revolutionary forces of General Francisco Madero and Pancho Villa in the revolutionary uprising in Mexico. General Madero had no use for the Mormons, who wished to remain neutral. Neither had the U.S. government given any favorable aid for their revolution. In 1912, these revolutionaries began their attacks on border towns, including also the Mormon settlements. They actually drove the Mormons from Mexico, allowing them to take only one piece of baggage each, just as Bishop Coyle had seen in his dream. The Mormon Mexican colonies were broken up. No temple would be built there. Such a catastrophic event for the Mexican saints was a great sorrow for them. But the failure of the temple promised prophecy was even more disheartening to the leaders of the church. Bishop Coyle's prophecy and his dreams began to stir up new commotion and excitement, while faith in the spiritual powers of the church president began to wane. This kind of embarrassment usually causes jealousy and anger. Retaliation is the result. On April 22, 1913, the First Presidency wrote to Jonathan Page, Bishop Coyle's stake president, for information concerning the mine in Bishop Coyle. Page replied, but they again wrote to Page on July 19, 1913, asking for more information. By August of 1913, the First Presidency confirmed their stand against the mine by issuing a statement against the work. Many members of the church were astounded. They questioned the source of such actions, saying that a work that God had established should not be opposed by men who should be able to obtain the word and will of the Lord. When challenged to produce a revelation received by himself or anyone else indicating that the mine was not of God, Talmage was unable, or at least failed to do so. Historical Study of the Coyle Relief Mine, Christensen, page 43. But Dr. Talmage was not the only one questioned or challenged for a revelation against the mine. From that time to the present, no revelation has ever been produced which, if one had been given, would have been published many times. On the contrary, many stockholders have borne testimony to revelations given to them, in which it was made known that the work of that mine was of God. In a meeting on August 7, 1913, the First Presidency decided to send Elder Francis M. Lyman of the Council of 12 Apostles to Spanish Fork, for the purpose of releasing John Coyle as Bishop of the Leland Ward. See Journal History, August 7, 1913, page 3. Acting under the orders of Francis Lyman, the stake president released John Coyle as bishop, in which office he had served since May 31, 1908. He had served as a counselor from 1900 to 1908. Lars Peter Olsen became the new bishop of Leland Ward. Without allowing Bishop Coyle a word of defense, he reprimanded him severely and dismissed him from his office as Bishop of the Leland Ward. Bishop O.B. Huntington of the Springville First Ward, who witnessed it, said in my hearing that never in his life had he seen a man handled so roughly and swiftly as Bishop Coyle was handled, and given no chance whatever to defend himself. The Dream Mine Story, Pierce, page 24. Early in June of 1914, Stake President Page and the High Council of Nebo Stake, acting according to the demands of the First Presidency, summoned the executives of the mine to appear before them for a hearing. At this hearing, the accused were warned that all operations and stock sales must cease or else excommunication would follow. Coyle asked to see what charges had been brought against him. He was shown a letter from President Joseph F. Smith in which the following accusations were listed. 1. That Coyle intended to redeem all of the dead. 2. That Coyle was going to utilize the wealth of his mine to build up the city of Zion in Jackson County, Missouri. 3. That he intended to increase the capital stock of the company, then sell out and make himself rich. 4. That Coyle was receiving revelation from members of the church. The bishop responded by saying the charges were false. He requested the permission to refer his case before the president of the church, since he had made the charges. But he was never allowed to face his accusers. Further difficulties for Bishop Coyle were not long in coming. Page had one time given the whole mining venture his approval, and had declared that it was inspired. It is not known what pressures had been placed upon him, but he informed Bishop Coyle that work on the mine must cease, or else he would lose his membership in the church. Bishop Coyle remembered the Nephite warning that the mine would be shut down, but the same powers that closed it would see that it was opened again. So he humbly submitted to the mandate of the church, and the mine was closed. This presents one of the strange paradoxes in church history. The mine was accepted and believed in by many members of the church. They claimed the same spirit that told them the gospel was true, dictated to them that the mine was true also. They could not deny one any more than they could the other. Some members of the church were hostile and bitter against the mine, declaring it to be of the devil. Again, others cared less and considered that it was just an ordinary mine. Apostle James E. Talmage prepared a newspaper article entitled, "The Warning Voice in Opposition to the Mine," which article was signed by the First Presidency of the Church on August 2, 1913. The 1913 announcement. The Warning Voice. To the officers and members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. From the days of Hiram Page, Doc. and Cov. Sec. 28. At different periods there have been manifestations from delusive spirits to members of the Church. Sometimes these have come to men and women who, because of transgression, became easy prey to the arch-deceiver. At other times people who pride themselves on their strict observance of the rules and ordinances and ceremonies of the Church, are led astray by false spirits, who exercise an influence so imitative of that which proceeds from a divine source, that even these persons, who think they are the very elect, find it difficult to discern the essential difference. Satan himself has transformed himself to be apparently an angel of light. When visions, dreams, tongues, prophecy, impressions or any extraordinary gift or inspiration conveys something out of harmony with the accepted revelations of the Church, or contrary to the decisions of its constituted authorities, Latter-day Saints may know that it is not of God, no matter how plausible it may appear. Also they should understand the directions for the guidance of the Church will come, by revelation, through the head. All faithful members are entitled to the inspiration of the Holy Spirit for themselves, their families, and for those over whom they are appointed and ordained to preside. But anything at discord with that which comes from God through the head of the Church, is not to be received as authoritative or reliable. In secular as well as spiritual affairs, saints may receive divine guidance and revelation affecting themselves, but this does not convey authority to direct others, and is not to be accepted when contrary to Church covenants, doctrine or discipline, or to known facts, demonstrated truths, or good common sense. No person has the right to induce his fellow members of the Church to engage in speculations or take stock in ventures of any kind, on the specious claim of divine revelation or vision or dream, especially when it is in opposition to the voice of recognized authority, local or general. The Lord's Church is a house of order. It is not governed by individual gifts or manifestations, but by the order and power of the holy priesthood, as sustained by the voice and vote of the Church in its appointed conferences. A history of the Church records many pretended revelations claimed by impostors or zealots, who believed in the manifestations they sought to lead other persons to accept, and in every instance, disappointment, sorrow and disaster have resulted therefrom. Financial loss and sometimes utter ruin have followed. We feel it our duty to warn the Latter-day Saints against fake mining schemes, which have no warrant for success, beyond the professed spiritual manifestations of their projectors, and the influence gained over the excited minds of their victims. We caution the saints against investing money or property in shares of stock, which bring no profit to anyone, but those who issue and trade in them. Fanciful schemes to make money for the alleged purpose of redeeming or providing means for the salvation of the dead or other seemingly worthy objects, should not deceive anyone acquainted with the order of the Church, and will result only in waste of time and labor, which might be devoted now to doing something tangible and worthy, and of record on earth and in heaven. Be not led by any spirit or influence that discredits established authority, contradicts true scientific principles and discoveries, or leads away from the direct revelations of God for the government of the Church. The Holy Ghost does not contradict its own revealings. Truth is always harmonious with itself. Piety is often the cloak of error. The counsels of the Lord through the channel he has appointed will be followed with safety. Therefore, you Latter-day Saints, profit by these words of warning. Joseph F. Smith. Anthony H. Lund, Charles W. Penrose. First Presidency. On August 16, 1913, the Church leaders once again emphasized their stand against the mine, by reproducing the article of August 2, with the following comments. Owing to the importance of the subject treated in the letter of the First Presidency to the officers and members of the Church which appeared in the Deseret News of August 2 of this year, it is reproduced at the head of this column. We trust the saints generally will profit by the advice given, and in order to bring it to the attention of all members, it might be well to cause the letter to be read in ward meetings or state conferences or other similar gatherings of the people. The First Presidency warns the saints against investing in worthless stock, even if promoters allege that they are guided by dreams and revelations. It is a timely warning. Almost everyone has heard stories of how such and such found a rich mine, by following directions given in a dream, and many fondly hope for similar luck, but in most instances, it will be found on investigation, that such stories have little or no foundation in fact. They belong to a class where rumors which like the wind, bloweth where it listeth, and thou hearest the sound thereof. But canst not tell whence it cometh or whither it goeth. No one should be guided by such rumors but by reason enlightened by the Holy Spirit. It is a safe rule not to accept the counsel of anyone who is in any way antagonistic to those who have been duly appointed to lead and guide Israel. And it will be found that the promoters of dream mines and vision enterprises generally are of that class. They find fault and pass judgment without justification. But by that very fact they warn the saints to steer clear of them, just as the ringing or whistling of buoys during foggy weather call attention to mariners to the presence of danger by the noise they make. An historical study of the Coil Relief Mine, 1894 to 1962, Christensen, page 46. This warning article was again reprinted in the Deseret News, December 29, 1945, over the signatures of President George Albert Smith and his two counselors. But the bishop was not trying to dictate the affairs of the church. The miners were not trying to change the doctrines or principles, nor instructing how to do missionary work or temple endowments. Nor was the stock of the mine only for members of the church. The fact that it is a mining venture with a spiritual guidance is certainly not an uncommon thing, rather, it is the way mining should be conducted. The fact that Jesse Knight had a manifestation that saved the church is enough proof that God can speak to others outside of the general authorities of the church, even to proving a blessing to the church. Many church members became involved with the mine, even though they had no particular desire or interest to do so. However, the Lord may call people to a special labor or mission, yet it may be against their own will or pleasure. Frank Hanks was one of those called by the Lord to assist in that mine, even though he had no interest in it. Frank owned a farm near Salem which occupied all of his time and attention. Yet he often saw and greeted John Coyle. He never became a personal friend or was closely associated with him until after the following incident. Frank Hanks was known to have the finest team of matched horses in the county. His team had won prizes at state and county fairs that made him the envy of every farmer in the valley. Now Frank Hanks had a very disturbing dream, clear and distinct. He was shown in his dream that he should sell this prized team of horses and give the money to Bishop Coyle for the dream mine. Hanks was not at all favorable to the dream, and it bothered him no end to know of a certainty if the dream were true and given to him from the Lord, or if it were more in the class of a nightmare. He remembered a test he had read about in the Old Testament of how righteous Gideon had determined his mission from the Lord by sewing a fleece on which dew was to form, with none on the ground. And how it was repeated the next night with the fleece dry but the ground wet with dew. See Judges 6:36-40. So Frank Hanks put a fleece on the lawn and prayed as did Gideon, that if his dream was true, let there be dew on the fleece the next morning, but let it be dry on the grass. And the next morning it was so, and Hanks saw that he had a very damp fleece, but the grass was dry. The next night Hanks reversed himself and asked then for the fleece to be dry and the grass to be wet. And the next morning it was so, and Frank Hanks knew that his dream was of the Lord. Therefore, he offered his prize team for sale, and gave the money to Bishop Coyle. Bishop Coyle was equally inspired to make Frank Hanks a director in the company, thereby gaining a loyal and devoted supporter. Hanks was further rewarded by the Lord himself, when shortly before his death, he was permitted to make a spiritual visit into the 9 rooms, and was able to describe in intimate detail what he had been shown. The Dream Mine Story, Pierce, pages 27-28. So much controversy among church members created much interest and investigation. Even the authorities of the church were not in agreement with the actions of the First Presidency, as indicated by the following examples. Apostle George Teasdale once listened to the whole story. He later said he knew it was of God, and gave it his official blessing, and commended Bishop Coyle for his work on the mine. Apostle Matthias F. Cowley, although very pressed for money, was another who bought stock in the mine, and gave it his favor and approval, declaring that it was inspired of God. President Anthony W. Ivins invited Bishop Coyle into his office, and asked to hear the story. He listened carefully and asked many questions. After Bishop Coyle related the details of his call to the mine, President Ivins said that the bishop had a great obligation from the Lord, and he must follow through on that mining mission. This was in fulfillment of a dream that Bishop Coyle had previously received about an interview with President Ivins. President J. Golden Kimball was one of the 7 presidents of the 70s, and knew Bishop Coyle from the mission field. This man was close enough to the Lord that his name was mentioned by the Nephite messengers. They instructed Bishop Coyle that he should give Pres. Kimball 500 shares of stock whether he could pay for it or not. Later, Golden Kimball was invited by Bishop Coyle to come down for a visit, which he did. After the bishop related the whole story, Golden paced the floor back and forth without saying a word. Then, Bishop Coyle said, "Well, do you believe it or not?" The reply was, "How much is the stock?" When he asked for 500 shares, Golden was astounded when Bishop Coyle handed him a certificate already filled out for that amount. J. Golden Kimball was a friend too. Bishop Coyle and a strong supporter of the mine throughout his life. One of the last testimonies given of Golden's association with Coyle and the mine was by Vern Bullock, who said, "The last I was at the mine and saw Bishop Coyle was about 1937. I visited the mine with a gentleman that was quite closely connected with the mine, by the name of June M. Pierce, who at that time lived in Springville. Mr. Pierce passed away a couple of years ago. But the last time I was there I might state here, though, that the visit I made up there, J. Golden Kimball, his wife, and a grandson happened to be at the cabin at the mine, and as I passed by he was about to leave, and he said, 'The Lord bless you, Bishop Coyle, and may you have success,' or something to that effect." Dream Mine. A Study in Mormon Folklore, Joe Stanley Graham, page 252, quote by Vern Bullock, Provo, Utah, December 7, 1969. These were all good men who prayed and sought counsel from the Lord. They were humble enough to ask and ponder the whole issue before they made any judgments. They were not the kind who would rather trust in the arm of flesh for all their answers. They got their own answers from the heavens. The question so often arises: how could so many members of the church, even many leaders, be wrong in their judgment against the mind? First, every man, even the president of the church, is often persuaded by his own opinions. Second, everyone who trusts the opinion of others rather than receive revelation on the matter is also subject to error. The error in personal judgment by some official of the church has snowballed by gathering opponents and momentum down through the years. In that day when the mind is vindicated, then shall many eyes be opened to the truth that trusting in the arm of flesh is a serious sin. The restrictions placed upon John Coyle by some of the leaders of the church prevented him and his associates from doing any further work on the mine. But annual assessment work is required by law. Soon a Coyle mining property became delinquent, and the claims were placed back upon the open market. Anyone could refile on the property, take up the claim, and become the new and rightful owner. The first two claims that became delinquent were snapped up by two Pearson brothers. The January deadline on the remaining claims was approaching. Other people were waiting and watching for a chance to jump the remaining claims. But Bishop Coyle had been warned that if he went on that hill again, he would be excommunicated. There was nothing he could do. Then he had another dream. He was given the comforting assurance that it would all turn out well in the end. He saw in his dream that the mine was likened to a huge log, from which two men came and removed a slab, or claim, from each side of the log. Then someone else came along and took the entire log. But in a short time the log was returned to him, then the two slabs were also returned. One day a man by the name of Ben H. Bullock was sitting in a chair of the lobby in the Kenyon Hotel in Salt Lake City. It was early morning and Ben was half dozing in the easy chair when a clear voice spoke to him. It directed him to go to the dream mine and take up the claims of the mine. He understood that it was to save the mine for Bishop Coyle. Being one to give quick obedience to such promptings, Bullock at once departed for Spanish Fork, where he secured a horse and rode to Water Canyon, as far as the horse could make it in the deep January snow. Then he tried to continue on foot only to find that he sank in the snow almost to his hips, and could make no progress. Then it was that Ben H. Bullock knelt down in the snow, and most earnestly prayed that if the Lord desired him to complete this job, then to please make the snow hard enough to hold him up. He tried it again, and now the snow held, and without further trouble, he was able to stake out and place notices on the main series of 8 claims. After that it was only a matter of recording them and then signing a quitclaim deed back to the Coyle Mining Company, all of which was accomplished within a 3-day period. And thus the relief mine was once again secure for the stockholders without the necessity for anyone having to do any assessment work, and thereby placing in jeopardy their church membership, a very real threat at the time. A few more years and the Peterson slabs were also restored to the company, and thus was fulfilled the dream of the log and the slabs. The Dream Mine Story, Pierce, page 32. After the church protest against the mine, the state soon took up the banter. Probably the State Securities Commission was encouraged or induced to make an attempt to close the mine. The SSC called Dr. Frederick J. Pack of the University of Utah to investigate the mine and make a report to the state of his finding. Dr. Pack was accredited as being one of the best geologists in the state, and he was given national honors by being included in the Who's Who in America publications. His fame and honors became somewhat tarnished after he declared that a commercial quantity of oil would never be found in Utah. For many years he claimed nearly all of Utah's oil had been dissipated down the Colorado River. However, Utah today claims one of the nation's largest oil reserves. Dr. Pack had condemned the Dream Mine before ever visiting the property. Several of us have talked with Dr. Frederick J. Pack upon the matter, and found him very adverse, radically so. In fact, we have set him completely out of the affair. We thought he was giving us facts, but upon investigation we found he has never been at the mine or upon the mountains in that region, talking only from second-hand hearsay, or from geological structure in general. We are not seeking men's opinions unless they are first-hand. We are rather shocked with the utter intolerance among mankind generally. Seemingly, some people accept gossip in preference to the truth. Statement made by Carter E. Grant, September 9, 1931, to James E. Talmage, page 5. Finally, Dr. Pack went to the Dream Mine, took samples of ore from various places in the tunnels, and made his report to the Securities Commission, offering his opinion in condemnation of the project by saying, "In my judgment, the Coyle mining property offers no encouragement whatsoever for the future. Evidences of commercial mineralization are wholly lacking. The ore bodies recently discovered are shown by assays to be worthless. This is also true of the ore in the mill bins awaiting treatment. I have seldom, if ever, seen a mining prospect that exhibited such a complete absence of mineralizations." Deseret News, Jan 20, 1933. The state now felt they had the ammunition they desired to stop work at the mine and shut down its operations. Deseret News, Salt Lake City, Utah, Friday, January 20, 1933. Board orders charge in Dream Mine case. Action follows special report on properties of company. If the state presents evidence that company stock has been sold without a permit from the Securities Commission, a complaint will be issued in 10 minutes, said Harold Wallace, county attorney. At the same time, Mr. Wallace said that his files are now flooded with requests from individuals for complaints as a result of the sale of stock in the Dream Mine. All of these requests, he said, come from individuals who have purchased personal stock from other individuals, and in such cases, complaints have no foundation in law. A report late Friday from the Utah County Attorney's Office was to the effect that if the information of the State Securities Commission showed any crime committed or law violated by the officials of the Coil Mining Company, action by the county attorney will follow immediately. On receipt of reports from Dr. Frederick J. Pack that the Coil Mining Company property, otherwise known as the Dream Mine, situated near Salem, Utah, offers no encouragement whatsoever for the future, the State Securities Commission Friday morning at the state capitol directed Scott P. Stewart, Executive Secretary, to file action with the county attorney, charging the Coil Mining Company management with ... Ordered by state. Meantime, Dr. Pack was employed in a consulting capacity to make a fair and thorough investigation of the physical condition existing at the mine, and as a result of which a report condemning the enterprise on the basis of its geologic and commercial features was received Friday. At the conclusion of this report, Dr. Pack summarizes conditions at the mine in the following words. In conclusion, I desire to state that in my judgment, the Coil Mining property offers no encouragement whatsoever for the future. While its formations adjacent to the Great Wasatch Fault are intimately displaced, fractured, yet evidences of commercial mineralization are wholly lacking. The ore bodies recently discovered are shown by assays to be worthless. This is also true of the ore in the mill bins awaiting treatment. The building of a mill under such conditions is not only immature, but involves the useless expenditure of both labor and money. In the main body of his report, Dr. Pack states that the workings consist primarily of a tunnel 3/5 of a mile in length, together with one principal drift which in turn gives rise to several minor drifts. Minor lacking. The main drift leaves the tunnel at a distance of approximately 2,000 feet from its portal. Other workings have been put in higher up on the mountain. On the occasion of Dr. Pack's inspection, he said his party was led through the mine by John H. Coyle, discoverer of the mine, Byron Grant, and several others. After a technical description of geological conditions, Dr. Pack reports that he has seldom if ever seen a mining prospect . Dr. Pack says that while at the mine he heard Mr. Coyle and others make frequent reference to certain veins within the mine, but the truth is, I did not find a single vein within the entire property. These so-called veins are usually either brecciated zones or masses of gouge on fold surfaces. The operators apparently did not make this distinction, in consequence of which they have repeatedly followed brecciated zones, apparently in the hope of finding ore. Further in his statement, Dr. Pack says that he requested Mr. Coyle to direct him to places where the highest values had been discovered. One sample was taken on a left side drift, called sample number 1, and another sample number 2 was taken from a right-hand drift. Low-grade gold found. According to the information given Dr. Pack, low-grade values in gold existed in both places from which sample were taken. On returning to Salt Lake Drive, Pack submitted these samples to several assayers after being ground and divided at the metallurgical laboratory at the University of Utah. None of these samples returned values greater than 6 cents a ton in gold, according to one assaying firm, while another reported nothing to exceed 10 cents per ton in gold. In addition to the 2 samples numbered 1 and 2, 6 additional samples were taken, making 8 in all. The 8th sample, known as sample number 8, was taken from the ore bin, where Mr. Coyle said he knew the ore contained value. Sample number 8, taken from the ore bin, showed 10 cents in gold to the ton in one report, and only a trace in another assay. Silver values are correspondingly low, running from a slight trace to 1/10 of 1 ounce per ton. In no case, reports Dr. Pack, were the assayers informed as to the source of the ore, or to my identity, or that the ore had been assayed by another firm. Mr. Grant wished to be present while the assays were being run, and was allowed this privilege in both cases. Mr. Stewart announced Friday afternoon that he will take the matter up with the county attorney for action. So many of the charges against John Coyle and the mine were so far out of line that the bishop and the stockholders had to make a rebuttal to them. The Desert News refused to print their announcement, so they had to buy advertising space in the Salt Lake Telegram. It appeared as follows. Dream Mine President replies to Dr. Pack. John H. Coyle answers statement of Frederick J. Pack. For a number of years, myself and friends have been laboring persistently to secure values at the Coil Mine, or Dream Mine situated southeast of Spanish Fork. Since statements recently have been published by Dr. Frederick J. Pack that we have no present values nor any future prospects and have proceeded without having had any values, I am submitting the following reports. Assays made by Thomas E. Chatwin of Mammoth, Utah, August to December, inclusive, 1931, representing several hundred assays, vary from 40 cents to $6.40 per ton in gold. The Chemical Quantitative and Qualitative Analysis by H. Romerin, Ph.D., on December 24, 1932, gives a return of $2 per ton in gold, and declares the following metals to be present. platinum, rhodium, osmium, nickel, arsenic, antimony, lead and iron. Incidentally, on the same date stated above, December 24, 1932, Junius J. Hayes of the University of Utah faculty reported that he had assayed samples collected by himself from the Coil mine and found gold to the extent of $1.70 and 80 cents per ton. These assays closely ally with one another. The following assays from various assayers in the city are still more of a definite informative nature. All samples were collected with the view of getting a fair return of the ore, then being mined in the various drifts of the Coil mine. Crisman and Nichols, September 6, 1932, returned $1.40 per ton in gold. Alonzo P. Bardwell, September 26, 1932, returned $6.89 per ton in gold. Black and Deason, April 22, 1932, returned $40.80 per ton in gold. The officials of the Coil Mining Company, always wishing to get at definite facts, have spared no efforts in getting at true results. Respecting this fact, they had a series of samples submitted to the Assay Office of the United States at Salt Lake City, Utah, which rendered the following dates and returns. September 19, 1932, $22.40 and $64 per ton in gold. October 1, 1932, $17.60 per ton in gold. October 7, 1932, 80 cents, $1.20, $2 per ton in gold. Byron E. Grant, working at the Coil Mining Company's assay office during the months of October, November and December, made upward of 1,000 assays, showing returns up from a trace to $444 per ton in gold. A more careful analysis of these many assay slips shows several returns over $100 per ton, while the great majority of the assay slips show returns up from $2 and $3 up to $30. Such figures as $20, $16.80, $4.80, $2.60, $12, $13.80 and $5.60 present themselves bluntly while thumbing this large collection of assay slips, bearing the signature of Byron E. Grant. Report of John M. Bestelmeyer of June 6, 1933. On May 30, 1933, at the request of interested parties and for certain definite reasons, and with the assistance of Mr. D. W. Jeffs, manager of the Utah Gold Company, we visited the Coil Mining Company, situated at the base of the Wasatch Range, easterly of Salem, Utah, to sample certain faces within the workings of the mine, for the purpose of definitely proving any gold values that might be obtained by direct amalgamation and to determine as nearly as possible the value, if any, in ounces of gold per ton. All samples taken were properly numbered, dated and designated as to position, width of vein, with all faces properly cleaned of loose material, grooved and channeled, at regular predetermined distances, with due regard to the width of sample taken, to gain as near as humanly possible, a result of actual value, without fear or favor to anyone concerned. Sample number 139 returns values of $15.90 per ton in gold. Sample number 140 $17. Sample number 141, $44. Sample number 142, $21.60. Sample number 143, $22. Sample number 144, $5.50. Sample number 145, $15. Sample number 146, $14.80. And sample number 147, $9.10. As you know, these samples were taken to Salt Lake to be pulverized to the required mesh, and on June 4 were amalgamated by Mr. Fred Thompson, in our presence, afterwards sealing the gold in glass vials. I personally weighed the gold, with the results as tabulated. It might be well to state that no attempt is made here to go into locations, history, development, or exposures, topographical or geological features, other than to state that all work, past, present and future plans, is carried on in a business-like, miner-like manner, and is impressive, of good judgment, vision, personality and determination of Mr. Coil. While the report of Dr. Frederick J. Pack states the complete absence of ore, the above report of Mr. Bestelmeyer proves ore of a commercial value to be present. Both men are competent in their respective fields. Mr. Bestelmeyer is a mining man of tried integrity and long experience, while Dr. Pack is a teacher of geology. It seems Coil Mining Company accepts the report of Mr. Bestelmeyer, since his report was made from an nonpartisan, unbiased standpoint, and free from any exterior intimidating influence. Dr. Pack, representing the state of Utah, took one set of 8 samples from the Coil Mining Company, and from a return of these samples, draws the conclusion that the Coil mine offers no hope for the future. The Coil Mining Company wishes to take the liberty to state that such a method of procedure is entirely unfair, unscientific, and unsatisfactory to our company. Due to the fluctuating nature of the ore, varying from a few dollars one day to several $100s on another day, as proved by careful daily assays made by the company, any one sample taken on any specific day could neither condemn nor justify the mine. Supposing Dr. Pack and his party should have visited the Coil mine on a day when the company assayer surrendered returns of $444, as was done on November 9, 1933, what would have been the nature of his report? The following letter received by Mr. John M. Coil. Provo, Utah, September 20th, 1933. Mr. John M. Coyle. Spanish Fork, Utah. Dear friend Coyle, I was very much impressed today on my brief visit to your gold mill, and especially so in the clean appearance and workmanlike manner in which your instructions are carried out. I take this means of expressing to you my desire to help you in any manner possible, for I fully realize the pressure and strain that you labor under from day to day. In retrospection, I can see Uncle Jesse Knight, a man of vision, struggling with poverty to find the Humbug Mine, and later the famous Iron Blossom Channel. I see John Bestelmeyer, the pioneer of the East Tintic, ridiculed as a visionary Dutchman, and I see F.J. Raditz and his now famous Goat Ranch, striving to convince the people of Utah of the hidden wealth at their very doorstep. And now for a few opinions formed during 25 years of active mining, the first of which is that geology does not make a mine, in the state of Utah. The Mercer District, the Silver Reef and the copper deposit at the Big Indian in San Juan County, as types are geological impossibilities, and yet they do occur. If the metal production of the world depended upon the ability of the geologist and mining engineer, the major part of civilization would still be wearing breech clouts, living in log huts and getting their daily existence with bow and arrow. As a matter of fact, time, natural disintegration, erosion, and Old Man Digmore are the principal factors surrounding every mining camp discovered up to date. The geologist is persistently put upon the defensive for the simple reason that Mother Nature writes upon the vaults of her hidden riches, a message in a language unknown to those scholarly, book-reading, so-called engineers. I maintain that a prospector with a jackass for a partner will find more ore in place in a given length of time than all the geologists in Salt Lake City. For many years prior to the coming of E.J. Raditz into the East Tintic District, I had personally guided engineers, geologists, mining experts and doodle bug artists over the large outcrops in the vicinity of the Tintic Standard Mine, only to have again and again their theoretical arguments on weak mineralization, cold solutions, detrimental faulting and other poppycock stock in trade. Years later it was my luck to stand beside a reputable engineer connected with a large mining and smelting company, and hear this man condemn the mine, and yet he stood with feet firmly placed on ore that later paid millions in dividends. I distinctly heard him ridicule the ore inside as worthless sulfide, filled with a few white specks. Knowing this and much more, I want to pass on this thought to you. Keep up the good work, and the day will surely come when your faith and hopes will be fully realized. With the best of wishes and all, I remain, sincerely, John M. Bestelmeyer. 284 East 4th North, Provo, Utah. I, John H. Coyle, hereby declare that all the above samples were taken from the Coyle mine, that their statements are true, that we have had values and have them at the present time. Signed, John H. Coyle. The Salt Lake Telegram. Tuesday evening, January 24, 1933. Executive Secretary of the State Securities Commission, Scott P. Stewart, on 2 occasions brought executives of the Dream Mine before the court on charges of fraud. Both times they were released without sufficient evidence. Scott had been a highly paid patient surveyor for the Dream Mine, but now he became their opponent. The prime witness against the mine was a woman who declared that she didn't want money back for the stock, she only wanted the mine to turn out. This was not sufficient evidence of the fraud. Then the state denied Coyle a license to sell stock. Normally this would shut down a mining operation, because without the sale of stock, there would be no source of income for the workers or maintenance of the mine. But the Lord didn't intend for the work to stop then, so Coyle told the board of directors to issue him 50,000 shares of special stock, as payment for contract labor. This was to be in his own name as personal stock. The bishop would then personally hire workers for the mine. Since there was no law against a man selling his own stock, the Dream Mine continued to operate. The Federal Securities and Exchange Commission soon entered the arena in opposition to the mine. They somehow obtained a list of stockholders and sent them a long list of questions, trying to obtain some complaining witnesses who would help them press charges of fraud against the mine. The commission tried every avenue to uncover evidence that might be used in court to have the mine legally shut down. After a close examination of income and labor used in the mining operation, it was found that sufficient work had been performed to account for the money taken in through the sale of stock. So the charges of fraud had to be dropped. It has been said that at one time 17 deputy marshals were hunting for John Coyle. Thus, the church, the state, and the nation had combined to oppose Bishop Coyle in the mine. But there must needs be opposition, because when men make such judgments, they are judging themselves. Thus when the church, the state, and the nation combine in rejecting Bishop Coyle's revelation from God, then it becomes apparent that they are not in harmony with God. In such a condition, God can bring about his judgments. Thus, in spite of the opposition that brought about public censure, stopping all work on the mine, the losing of claims and the loss of his office in the church, Bishop Coyle had been warned by the Lord to prepare for just such trials. This opposition only proved to give new strength to the bishop. His prophecies were fulfilled, his mining claims were saved in a miraculous manner, and his name was gaining new respect from the most spiritual men in the church. It was clearly evident that the Lord was sustaining him and his mission at the mine. John and his family lived through a generation of scoffing and ridicule, not just from a common street prattle, but from prominent church and businessmen. His children suffered insults and derision all their life. Although he endured this constant barrage of indignities, he bore it meekly, and persistently continued with his work, as though they were only minor squalls to be expected on the sea of life. For Jesus himself testified that a prophet hath no honor in his own country. John 4:44. The next chapter will discuss the reopening of the mine, after being closed for 6 years, by the same power that had closed it, thus fulfilling another of Bishop John Coyle's prophecies.